Great, welcome everyone. This is the first of a series for Beyond the Studio. And tonight we have Alaina Simone. So if you know of the artist, I can read a little bit of the bio. Alaina Simone is an artist liaison and art consultant who works primarily in the field of contemporary art sales and education. She has produced and curated exhibitions with corresponding artist talks and educational programs in the Caribbean, Europe, and United States. Since 2009, Simone has worked as an artist liaison to established interdisciplinary artists such as Howardina Pindell, Fred Eversley, and Barbara Nizam, among many others. Barbara Nizam. She has worked closely with the estate of Armand, estate of Merton Simpson, estate of Alan Stone, and the estate of James Van der Zee, to name a few. In 2018, Simone co-founded Private View Soho, PRVT VW, a nomadic gallery project space and artist residency in New York City in collaboration with Verbier 3D Foundation co-founder Madeleine Paterno. She has led and produced panel discussions and happenings with Untitled Art Fair, Untitled Art San Francisco, in San Francisco, Prism Art Fair in Miami, Jan van Eyck Academy in the Netherlands, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, MOCAD in Brooklyn, Pratt University in Brooklyn, and National Arts Club in New York, and IESA International in Paris, among other notable institutions. Her exhibitions have been recognized by leading publications to include the New York Times, Art in America, Modern Painters, Art Forum, Art News, Hyperallergic, The New Yorker, and White Hot Magazine, among many others. In 2013, Simone received the Innovators of Change Award from J. Walter Thompson Worldwide. She serves on the board of Verbier 3D Foundation. Simone is an ambassador for Cool Culture, Residency Unlimited, Sculpture Center, and National Arts Club. Without further ado, you don't want to hear me talk, you want to hear Alaina Simone talk. So here she goes. Present the way.
Hi guys, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and spending some moments with us. I'm going to just, and thank you, Ye, for, for having me and Tsai CITY.
Tsai CITY and the Schwarzman Center, yes.
So yes, guys, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I've worked with a lot of artists from Yale over the years, and I couldn't be more excited to present to you. So I'm going to go through kind of a chronological order of how I've developed my career, which I think is a bit organic, starting with my development and growing up in Flint, Michigan. Flint gets, I'm going to share my screen. So art consulting, the power of art as catalyst for change. So looking at the organic development of my career, I mean, that's why when I was reached out to present, I was just honored, because it's, you do everything and you're just, going along, but you don't know that people are actually paying attention. So thank you so much again. So starting out, I grew up in Flint, Michigan. So Flint kind of gets a bad rap. But what people don't know is that Flint is home to Flint Institute of the Arts. It's a huge collection, is very involved in the community. Also, the Mart Warsh collection, which is one of the largest collections of African-American art in the US. So growing up in this environment, I also took early on, I took painting and sculpting classes at Flint Institute of the Arts, because my mother was kind of very, how could you say, proactive and just making sure that, I was well-rounded and I loved art. So I think this is where I first kind of was inside my first studio and learning to work with practicing artists. King Chavez Park. So growing up, kids in the inner city, every summer, we would do a program with Michigan State. This was all about community. This is all about civil service. So it's a lot of my practice too. A lot of my practice is also about community development and developing these immersive type of programs that really kind of hit, or I try to hit the core of the community where I think hopefully it matters to them. So when I'm creating a project, I'm really thinking about, who the audience is. Kettering University, which used to be a GMI Institute. We spent a lot of time here. And this is kind of like an interdisciplinary program. This is all about robotics. So we're looking at math, art, science, and everything. And just being, kids, but exploring, and then having the, opportunity to do so. So my university, moving along to university, and, just a life discovering African American art. So it's Hampton University, which is known as the home by the sea. Howard was probably my first choice, but I ended up with Hampton because Hampton has a huge collection of African American art, and it's the oldest African American museum in the United States. And it's actually the first institutional collection of work by African American artists, and it has the South's largest collection of ethnic art, including African and American Indian art and artifacts. So as a student, you're pretty much like, you're living amongst art. We also have like the banjo lesson, by Tanner. So that's there, and and it's just a source of pride. There's a huge Biggers mural that's in our library. So growing, just being immersed in this conversation, and it's very much so a part of our development at Hampton. And my summers were spent because I wasn't really in a situation where I could do free internships, or I didn't want to. I always liked, I was the kind of kid who always had like 2 to 3 jobs at a time. So I worked, in Flint, and this was a program that I participated in every summer. It was called Advancing Minorities' Interest in Engineering. And I got a chance to work with the marketing department at GM. And what that really trained me to do was to look for trends and look for forecasting and why are the cars blue? And, I really, was just like curious about all these things, loving art. I wanted to know like what drove like all these trends. And yeah, so that was kind of an early education for me, and very important in terms of like learning the corporate structures and how to work with, different teams. And Hampton also is the home to the International Review of African American Art, which was started in 1976 by Dr. Samela Lewis and Elizabeth. So that's a quarterly magazine that comes out still, to this, till now. And another early influence was an internship I did with Technology Films. And this was an entrepreneur by the name of Tony Smith. And it was a situation where, you walk into this office that's all about, it's just nothing but art and tech. And you have like street artists, but then you have fine artists. And it was just a mashup. And I was just, I don't know, it just completely on fire, where I wanted to know, about, interfacing. This came about, video, art, and web development. And Paint Cans and Politics was a story that Tony was doing. They were following a graffiti artist all over Detroit who was bombing out all these different buildings. And, Banksy has also been to Detroit and bombed it out. But the thing about Detroit is a lot of graffiti artists are there because, 15 years ago, it's a city full of plight. But not only that, it's a huge canvas because all the buildings are kind of, at that time were burned out. So from there, working with artists who were at that intersection of art, technology, media, they were painters, they were sculptors, but they were just musicians, they were everything. And I walked into this gallery called 555 Gallery and Studio. And that, again, I was thinking maybe I would start up my own practice again. But I became so, I fell in love again with not only the artists, but, just what they were doing with the community and, using that space to also, do these educational programs for children and for adults. And it was a space where they would invite emerging artists and establishing artists to like show together. So it became like a kind of a training ground, if you will, where like artists were learning how to show their work and, present to the market, beyond, the programs that, and their BFA programs and MFA programs. So as an independent curator, the thing that's most important to me is thinking about how artists have the power to change minds. And when I work with artists, I like to challenge them to embrace their sense of ownership and power. Because to me, it's like, all things great. I just think everything is art. And working with artists across disciplines and fields in order to challenge notions of identity, gender, education, and values. And looking at art as a unique space between individuals, economics, and social change. It is personal and transpersonal all at once. Artists and advisors generate opportunities for the present and the future. So to me, I was looking at like, what's now? How does this inform? How does our past inform our present? How does our present inform our future? And to me, I just felt that artists had, were the key to all of that. So moving along, I just wanted to share with you guys some milestones, and I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can. So this was really, to me, this was my first site-specific project, where I went, I actually, went out to the Hamptons. There was an annual event called Art for Life. And I wanted to figure out how I could, do a series because, everyone was there during the summer. I think we were just like 15 years too early, actually, because this is happening now. But we did it with Ed Clark, Frank Bowling. I believe we had Howard Dina, some pieces out there, Lerone Wilson. There was, so we had a series of artists that we were showing, and then we were giving, a percentage of that to charities because that was important to always be, involved in what the community was doing. And that was in 2008, and that was with GR Namdi Gallery. And we did that for a couple years with Rush Arts, and it was a lot of fun. And these paintings now, like, when we were selling at Clark, I mean, my goodness, they were like maybe 40, 50,000. These paintings that you're looking at now, probably like 500,000. Moving along, just, always wanting to be a part of the larger community. And Derek Adams was the executive director or curator of Rush Arts at the time. Standing next to him is Ayanna Jackson. Then you have Raina Zachary. And George is actually in the Senate right now. So we organized this exhibition for Obama. I believe we raised like $30,000, which to us at the time was a lot of money. And artists basically came out and just donated the work, and they gave a full, like all the proceeds went to Obama. And this was a lot of emerging Black artists at the time, some of whom are extremely, I think Purvis Young was in it. I know that Ed Clark was a part of that show. It was a, if you got a piece from that show, you did well. So moving along, after Namdi Gallery, they kind of, closed their New York space, and they went back to Chicago and then Detroit. I was just thinking about what I could, was going to do. And that was, I remember not really knowing what I was going to do. And I called my mother. And she said, we'll work for the artists. You've always worked for the artists. That's your thing. So I called Howard Dina. She said, come here. And I started working for her. And from there, I just started picking up other artists. And then I wanted to just I wanted to become independent. And I heard that Damon Dash had this space in Tribeca where he had, artists, painters, sculptors, musicians, and he was making it into a gallery, but it was like everything was in action. So I picked this picture because this was kind of cool. The dream catcher that you see in the middle is by Musa Hickson. Musa actually went to Hampton, but the album Dreamcatcher on the left is by Damon's nephew. So they were just running around, the gallery space, but very talented young guys at that time. I believe they were 14 and 17 years old. And Damon said, sit under the Dreamcatcher until you finish this album. And so they literally, like, you would walk by and they're like, what are you guys doing? They're like, Dame said we can't leave until we finish this album. So they finished the album. It's actually quite good, Dash. And and I love this because it was how art really influences, everything. And the kids were like sponges. And actually these same kids have another space that they opened up in Soho now that's kind of modeled after this DD 172. And it's quite fantastic. So this is Erykah Badu, because you're, at a space this is right after Damon left Rockefeller. So, he was working with Currents. He was working with a lot of different artists and, of all different disciplines. But at any given moment, there would be a concert that would break out. And the basement here was called Under 100. And it was a secret kind of a salon, kind of a, just a space. It was like really just for us. But what ended up happening is, it attracted a lot of people. So here's Erykah Badu performing, and, behind him, we kind of graffitied out the entire space. And this was just a lot of energy, a lot of fun. So after DD 172, I kind of got like, I have to leave New York. I don't, and I was liaising with Ben Jones, who's an artist and an educator. And Ben said, come with me to London. And that's when I started. This was my first international show. And I just started working with Madeline Paterno, who is co-founder of Verbier 3D Foundation. And I knew that they needed a curator. So Ben introduced me to a curator, a British Jamaican curator by the name of Paul Goodwin. So moving along to Verbier 3D. Now at this point was the largest, I'd never done anything like this. I'd never actually even been to Switzerland. And so coming in like from Geneva and looking at that mountain, it was a lot. We had 7 artists. The artists that I handpicked, this is Kiki and Carrie Jane. Kiki's a sculptor, but also co-founder. Carrie Jane was a board member and our photographer. So Verbier 3D, because I don't want to assume that anyone knows, what Verbier 3D is, but it's a nonprofit cultural organization dedicated to promoting contemporary art, environmentalism, and education through its artist residency and sculpture park. So founded in 2010. So we're really we're going into our decade-long celebration. So Madeline and Kiki wanted to create a cultural and artist residency and sculpture park at just it's way up in the mountains, guys. It's alpine high, as they would say. And our mission is to support emerging and established talent by pushing artists out of their comfort zones, fostering development that might be possible in the studio space. So this first year, the artists, I've had the honor of inviting a few artists to Verbier. Zach Ovey was introduced to me by someone I was working with at the time, Courtney Willis-Blair, who's now the head of a big gallery there in Chelsea. So Courtney introduced me to Zach, and Zach said, I have a vision to put an elephant on the mountain because, who knew that this is where Hannibal crossed, right here in Verbier, because it's really where all the Alps meet. You have the Swiss Alps, you have the French Alps, everything's right there. Actually, the park faces Mont Blanc. So Zach wanted to create this elephant, which is still on the mountain to this day, and it's called Elephant Walk. I love this piece. It's in skeletal form. It's kind of commenting on the elephant poaching and how they're taking the ivory. So it's commentating on a little bit more than that. So I love this piece, and I just wanted you guys to see what the studio space really looked like. This is Timothy Talbot Holmes, and this piece is called Femme Fatale, the Mother of Nature and All Her Causes. And this was again one of our first artists. That's me playing in the roses. This is Lil Ryman, who sent this rose. It was actually on display Park Avenue at the time, and he sent a rose to Verbier for us to display we installed it for the vernissage. Speeding forward, this is 2012, the next year. This is Agnieszka Szuke. I was working with Agnieszka. I was, talking about the park quite a lot. He said, I have an idea. So I presented it, and I loved it. He was just graduating from Cooper Union, and he made this magnificent sculpture that's no longer there. It's called the Forever Museum because, of course, the harsh terrain of the Swiss Alps. This one didn't last, but it was fantastic. It was a great project, and I was happy that this happened. So as I'm thinking about the mountain, I'm thinking about, of course I'm thinking about home. Then I got a call from someone, Brooklyn Bridge Park, said, I want you to do on the mountain what you did. I want you to do in Brooklyn Bridge Park what you did on the mountain. I said, okay, that's nothing but a word. That's like a dream to me. So we saw this artist who we had met, but I actually saw the work before I met her, and I thought this was fantastic. It was a performance piece. There was also, a sculpture. There was a beautiful sculpture. So her name, Eve Bailey. And so this piece is called Our Permanent Walk. And so this is, sculpture, but also I want you to see what it looks like on the mountain. It's just a magnificent, it looks like an angel wing to me. But there was a performance that took place in town in the middle of Verbier, and then it was installed on the mountain here. And I'm talking about Brooklyn because when I had that vision, I met Ilya and Emilia Kubikov, who are Russian artists. And they were doing a project in Cuba at the time called The Ship of Tolerance. And I love this project. Verbier is only a couple hours from Geneva. So if you come to Verbier, you have to go through Geneva. So The Ship of Tolerance is a kids project where they create, the base, the boat, and then the kids create the sails. So this particular, so these are our kids in Switzerland who are, creating sails to basically, they're going to be installed with other kids from all around the world, kids from Brooklyn, kids from Cuba, just everywhere. And this project was, just kind of like, that was a dream. So then it did dock in Brooklyn Bridge. This happened, and it was fantastic. It happened during a festival there in Brooklyn. And also because, this was, Ilya was celebrating his 80th birthday. So we went to Moscow, and this is in Gorky Park. And this was hosted by Garage Museum, and Ilya and Emilia invited me over. They invited us over to take part of this celebration, and it was fantastic. And I just wanted to show you guys like just a little bit of, a little bit of the process. And this is James Capper. I love James. James is based in London. And so he did a project called the Aero Cab. So James created part of his project in the studio and then, brought it over to Verbier. And it was installed there on the mountain, and it's still there in situ. So from there, because we had all, these relationships with all these international artists and all of the artists that we pretty much work with, it's a long conversation. The curator, Alexa Cusper, and Paul Goodwin are really good with keeping up with everyone. And we're kind of like a constant, we're constantly in contact with everyone. So Private View was a vision that Madeline and I, when we've always thought about having a space in New York that we could bring artists, we could bring galleries, and like kind of, artists that aren't showing with maybe a gallery or a gallery that doesn't have a space in New York, because New York is really it's like it's an epicenter for contemporary art. And if you're not in New York, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's just about visibility. So we had the honor of hosting Addis Fine Art from Ethiopia. It's a gallery. And I was working with Tariku Shifra, and we hosted them for this exhibition. This was our first exhibition at Private View. So we always do dinners. We always have fun, guys. It's always about that. And this is another exhibition that we did around abstraction with Howard Sherman, Patrick Eugene, Adrian Gaither, Carmen Deborah. And this was also great. And this is our most recent exhibition in Verbier on the mountain. That's a piece by Ilya and Emilia Kubikov. And it's called The Great Pause, because we weren't able to do our residency program this year because of COVID and the pandemic. So we invited the artists to, Alexa came up with this, she curated this amazing exhibition where the artists submitted a piece, and we put it on the side of like almost like a lookout point to like just pause and just be able to think and be one with nature. So this was a very I did love this project. So our current artist in resident is Yale alum Natalie Ball, and Natalie's work. Natalie's a Native American artist, and she was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. Bachelor's degree with double major in ethnic studies. From Oregon, she studied education in New Zealand. She attained her master's degree focused on indigenous contemporary art, and then relocated to her ancestral homeland to raise her 3 children. She's shown everywhere, and her work is fantastic. This is Natalie. So I wanted to talk about moving along, art consulting as a nuanced collective network platform towards social change. So art consulting provides a space outside the framework of the artists, of the art world as a whole. Consulting interfaces between the business of contemporary art while amplifying the artist's signals and messages to the world at large. The art of advising is an art practice itself. It creates new conditions for generating power and social change. The things that are the most important to me, I'm providing a service to contemporary artists. I have a global network of art advisors, curators, artists, museums, and galleries. Developing strategies and really working with everyone between the museums, the galleries, and the private collectors, and identifying shifts in cultural aesthetics and practices, and creating new business opportunities, whether it's regionally, nationally, and globally. So at the same time, I'm running parallel because it's at the same time that the mountain's happening, I was directing Merton Simpson Gallery. So going back to Purvis Young. So Purvis, he passed away in 2010. I was introduced to his work actually in 2008 at the Obama art auction that I just showed you guys a little bit earlier. There was a collector, was an early collector of Purvis, and they made a video of Purvis, and Purvis was, from Overton, Miami. He passed away of diabetes. He was just completely prolific. I mean, his work was, he didn't stop. He would go into the library and just paint on library books, anything. But, they would put him maybe in the, what do you call, a folk art category. But I was interested in the conversation between if Purvis is folk art, and then I'm working with traditional art, and that's also, they were also artists that were untaught. Like, I was just interested in exploring, that conversation. Like, what does it mean to be self-taught? I mean, like, what qualifies who and what narrative, do you take on? So moving forward, I was really, this is just a show that I did with Alan Stone Estate. And Eve, who you saw on the mountain, Our Permanent Walk, those are her drawings. She's if you please, now, I don't know how many, links to her work, but her work is just very, she's just a very smart, she's interdisciplinary. So she's always looking at math, science, and so this is a hand, you can't really see it, but it's a hand that's the map of New York City with these indigenous pieces. And Joan Thorne, her work is here too as well. She was a part of this show, which was fantastic. I love Joan's work. So iconomania. A lot of people don't know that the owner of Disney collected traditional African art. But if you look at a Dan mask, it looks kind of like Mickey to me. So I was interested in these, how like these similarities that just humans, what draws us to like certain objects or certain, like iconography, like why, and this is a Dan Gary mask from the Ivory Coast that's juxtaposed against another artist that they would say is self-taught, Noel Leon, and he's Cuban, a Cuban artist from Miami. And this is Tyrone Mitchell, also juxtaposed against traditional African art. And, you almost can't tell traditional work and what's Tyrone's work. I believe he has work up at Friedman Gallery now. So moving along, after, Merton Simpson became an estate, I wanted to kind of hit the road again and start moving around. So I was introduced by a friend of mine, April Hunt, and invited by an artist, Karis Kennedy. And Karis wanted to engage her local community and create a site-specific project that spoke to the microcosm of what, St. Croix, the USVI is actually. And the USVI, I was looking at it because it was St. Croix. There's, 3 islands. You have St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John. St. Croix is a fertile, it's really a land. It's not a volcano. So it was very fertile, and it has, I believe, 7 or 8 different footprints. So, it was owned by all these different, colonial powers, if you will. And all of those footprints are still there, which makes for, honestly, a beautiful kind of a mix of people but also it's like it's at the intersection of race, identity, gender, power, and the environment. So I was looking at these 5 premises, and I, titled that Take 5. And also because we're always in, Art Basel. It's like, Art Basel is just a time when we run from day to night. And then, you look over and you're like, man, I just want to go and everyone's, going off to the islands. We want to go to the islands and just kind of hang out, but we still want to be around art. So this happened right after Art Basel. And then also I was thinking that a lot of people that live internationally will be able to actually participate and come, because St. Croix is really a 30-minute plane ride from Miami. So you leave and you're just, it's just night and day, and it was great. And I was also inspired by the photographer, Wyatt Gallery, and also Kiana. But Wyatt did a book, Treasures of the Caribbean, and something that I never really thought about is how many Jewish families ran to the islands. So there's a lot of synagogues on a lot of islands. So you have this mix of, not only ethnic cultures, but also religions. You have Christian, you have Muslim, you have Islamic, you have Jewish. It's but everyone is living together and quite doing it, existing quite well together. So it was like a little microcosm of the world. St. Croix, it's it's a jewel. It really is. And I guess that's why so many colonial powers fought over it. So as we're scouting the island, it's really important to me, when I'm doing these sorts of projects, to really connect with the people that, I'm on somebody else's turf, if you will. So, I connected with Frandel, who's the executive director of Crucian Heritage and Nature and the Caribbean Museum of Arts. So this is WIM Museum, which used to be the slave master's house. It's actually a sugar plantation. And so from there, we invited New York, at the time, based artist David Antonio Cruz to do Green How I Want You Green. I saw this performed when I was working with Jasmine Wahi and Rebecca Jampol at Project for Empty Space. And David was an artist in resident. And it was there, in Jersey. And it was, I couldn't stop crying. It's half performed in Spanish and half in English, but it's about Garcia. It's his lost poetry. And it's just the most beautiful. It was just beautiful. I didn't really know what he was saying, but it was just the way that David puts together his performances are just like his paintings. They're just really intricate, beautiful, and just heartfelt. And this was almost like a clearing where I felt like we were taking back the narrative of the slave owner's house, his bedroom was the entire house, so it's like he barely had a kitchen. The only thing he had was a bedroom. So it was kind of, but it felt good to be there for our voices to be, shouting and clearing it all out. And it was a sold out. I think it was standing room only. And another thing that was quite interesting is especially in a community like St. Croix, where you have, there's so many artists that come from this space. Alexander Hamilton even, spent a little time in St. Croix. His mother lived in, I believe, was Crucian. He came from Nevis to St. Croix, and his mother was actually in jail in St. Croix. So you have so much history and so many scholars and artists and everything. It's just such a small island with a really big impact. So, everything that we did was pretty much sold out. Not that we didn't charge, anything, but I'm just saying it was the island was very happy. They were like, we don't get.
Oh, it's a meeting.
Hello? I'm sorry. So, okay. So this is take 5. This is Rashad Newsom. So this has been performed everywhere. It's about the 5 elements of Vogue. He's it's technology, but then also we're working with local Crucian musicians and artists who are adding to the sound, and this was fantastic. And also Jeanette Ellers, Whip It Good. This is a performance. I did a video. We did a video series that was right outside of in Christiansted on the grass there. And then also Oshana James, she had a performance that was in, she's Crucian. She did a performance in Frederiksted called For Gawi, the Deceitful Fellow. It's quite well. And this is Kiana. This is us. We went to Mecca. And Mecca was important to me because it was so close to St. Croix. It's like, again, 30 minutes away by a plane. And it was this was the first year, and it was, started by a New Yorker who, I just wanted to support and bring some artists that were, Black and brown, and just, and support what they were trying to do. And David came as well. So touching the community, I'll try to roll through this really quick. So branding, strategy, artist management, production, art advising, performance development, curatorial services, and programs, panels, artist talks, happenings, dance, and it's everything. It's the environment, it's the moving image, it's technology, it's agriculture. But all the artists that I work with are really interested in everything. So this was an explosion of that. So this was DD 172 in Tribeca, and everyone who you see is an artist. So if you can imagine for months just being in a building with all of these guys as they're creating work, whether it's music, video, printmaking, every level was just chock-a-block with art. And it was just to be inside was just like, the vibe was insane, as you can see. So this was the last show that I did. This was in 2010 with Dash Gallery and DD 172. And this was curated by Derek Adams and Wardell Milan. It was called Do It Yourself, which I produced with Michelle Thurs. And this is a group exhibition. This was a group exhibition focused on sculpture, printmaking, video, photography, installation, mixed media, and how these direct action cause response resulting in a tangible object as an extension of that gesture. So this was, and a lot of these artists, names you'll notice now because they're all quite famous, to be quite honest. And so this is something I've been a member of the National Arts Club since 2008. And this was a panel discussion that I organized with the Young Members Committee and DJ Spooky. And this is Max Tyker of Gagosian Gallery. And we're talking about art and tech. And again, it's like, I'm just fortunate that people come out. This is another, right after Merton Simpson, I wanted to kind of hit the ground running. So this was with Candace Anderson of Cool Cultures, of Jonas, again, Leanne Stella, Jonah Ratman, Jasmine Waihe, and this was moderated by Bahia Robinson. And I just wanted to bring a lot of creatives together and just, just hear their perspective about, and that's what I'm doing a lot is I'm shaking the trees. I really want to talk to people. I really want to know what people want and what's on their mind. And so this is Derek's piece, Derek's exhibition. I was working with Project for Empty Space in Newark. And this is Culture Club, which was, if you know Derek, he's all about, he's very part of his work is immersive. It's an experience of Derek, and it's always quite a lot of fun. And so moving along, this was a panel discussion. So I thought I was invited by Prism to do a talk, and I was working with Tariku Shifra, and I wanted to know who Tariku thought would whose work he wanted to be in dialogue with, and it was Tahir Karl Karmali. And Tahir is from Kenya, and Tahir his work is abstract, but he's also interdisciplinary. So this is a talk with Donna Marie Baptiste, and if you know Donna was probably one of the first Black women I met who ever worked at a fair. And this is all the way back in 2006, 2007, 8. And this is Tahir's piece. And so this is made of raffia, which he sourced from the Congo. And it's about cobalt mining practices. It's called strata because, what people don't realize is a lot of the things that when they say, sustainable or, Tesla or, our computers are everything, all of this is stripped from the earth. And they're using kids to do that in the middle of the Congo, and kids are dying. So Tahir does work that kind of responds to the environment, or is a comment on what's going on, with natural resources all over the world and how it affects, humanity at large. And this is another piece by Tahir that we did at Volta. This is at David Zwirner. And this I put in because, this is Lucia Herrera, who is another Yale grad, but we are, looking at, also providing artists a space. Everything doesn't have to be for sale. We knew we weren't probably going to sell this piece. Maybe we will, maybe we won't like, but it wasn't about that. It was really just about what he wanted to make a comment on. And this was about, immigration, and these are like nets, and if you saw it in person, you'd feel it. And it's also quite lovely. So moving along, I don't know if you guys, I'm going to try to play this. So bless you, because we do these type of projects, so that, we do, well, I don't want to say we do whatever we want, but this is a branding project that we did for Pinot Ricard. And it's kind of like, it's not a part of an artist practice, but this is something that we collaborate with brands so that, it has this, an artist sort of a look and feel to it. So you can. So I'm showing you guys this. I mean, this is a collaboration with a lot of everyone. All these, they're all artists. And Miriam, who was our animator. I mean, from everyone, Marjorie, everyone was fantastic. Chance, the music. Moving forward, this is Richard Mayhew. This is a talk we did at Untitled with Lars Christian Bold and ACA Gallery. Richard is 96, and I wanted to. He's an interdisciplinary professor. He has been. He's always taught interdisciplinary studies, and I wanted to speak to him because he's native. He's native, Afro-Native. Tahir's from Kenya, and Alterance Gumby is African American. And I wanted to just get their perspectives on how they're looking at shapes and colors and because they're all using all these different mediums. And I thought it would be great just to have Richard there. And this is moderated by Andrew Walker, Executive Director of the Almond Carter. I'll try to speed through. So this is my current project that I'm doing with Rachel Van Salette called Puzzle with a Purpose, Art Puzzles. This is Helena, Metapheria. And this is a piece that actually belongs in a private collection, but we were allowed to make a puzzle. And for me, I'm always trying to see how can I do something that comments or is respond to the artist, what they're doing already. And she's already taking different images. Here you can see civil rights, Black Panthers, but then she's sourcing images from all different types of protests from Ethiopia, from different parts of the world. Right now she's in LA, and she's looking at protest culture in LA. And I can't wait to see what that work looks like. So a life in practice, empowering artists, social justice, education advancement, gender identity, cultural innovation, artist development, practice and outreach, and expanding the general business of art, creating new platforms. And that's it. So thank you guys. This is me on the mountain. So thanks for having me. And yeah, this is it. A little bit of press. Everything I've done, it's most things have been covered. New York Times, Art in America, Modern Painters, Art News, Hyperallergic, all the things. And thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. If anyone has any questions, they can either unmute yourself and ask ahead, or drop it in the chat box. But to start off, I have a question. I saw your movement, moving from sort of more in the commercial side of things, working directly with painters, to sort of finding your own voice and becoming a framer of art, and sort of moving from a more marketplace to a more driven, vision-driven place into your practice. Can you speak more of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I actually I didn't start on the commercial side. I started, 555 is nonprofit.
Okay.
In Detroit, because it is it's a community that's just full of so many artists. I mean, Detroit is, musicians, you have paint. I mean, it's insane how many artists, are in Detroit. So all of my friends were artists, and I kind of have a little bit of a big mouth, so I became everybody's spokesperson, and and that's how I became started doing art PR, if you will, because they're like, Lena, da 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 da, and I kind of had the line to the mayor's office, and I could get things heard, So, I started writing press releases and working with artists in that way first. And that was from 555. So that was a nonprofit. So that means, of course, I'm not getting paid. But then I was working, so nonprofit. So then the for-profit gallery, GR Namdi, saw me, and they said, they said, well, we want you to work with us. And I was like, at first, no, because I wanted to be independent. I've always been about being independent. It really went from nonprofit to the commercial side and kind of put it together from there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I remember you telling me about you starting out in the 555 and then moving to and then sort of asking where do I go from there, asking your mom, and then like forming your alliance for Howardina. Yeah. We have a question here from Claire. She said, amazing, impressive, captivating narrative about the arc of your career. Thank you. You clearly had to remain open, agile of mind, and focused on the artistic goals of those you worked with. Do you have specific advice for those who might just be embarking on a hoped for career as an art consultant? How do you approach the work in a strategic and entrepreneurial way?
I think I think you have to really think about, and I think the pandemic has been great for this, really just think about what matters to you. And I think, that's going to be what drives you, but it also has to line up with, the artists that, you're attracted to and you're working with. So I think that's kind of, I think it comes from a real place. And that's that's from the inside of you, like, what is it that you want to say with your practice? What's important to you? I mean, I know for me, I know what's important to me. And that's why Take 5 was such a defining moment. I mean, I always was attracted to abstraction because it just made me think, it's like, when it's like a little bit more representational. I love representational work. This is kind of, this is like abstract. This is Brandon Coley-Cox behind me, another Yale graduate, but you can see it's abstract, but it's also, it's called Corrupted. So I do love representational work, but I'm into abstraction. So, and then I wanted to know more about, the arts of Africa and indigenous art. So it's like, I kind of followed what was in my heart. And I would say, if you do that, then you're on the right path.
I love Brandon's work. I didn't recognize that on the back, but I definitely love Brandon's work. We have another question here. Do you think art is healing?
Yes. I mean, absolutely. And that's the reason, honestly, I just knew when I was around art, it made me happy. I just knew, I've always, my father was an artist, my mother's quite artistic, there's art all over our house. But being around art just made me happy. I love the smell of paint. I love being in the studio. I love all these things. It's kind of like art is my happy place, if you will. So I do think that art is healing because, whether you're creating it or you're just, or whether you're just, able to be in front of it, I think it is very healing, but I'm one that thinks art is everything. I think everything.
Yeah, your practice is super interdisciplinary. So art is everything. Yeah, and speaking of the healing aspect, you touched on some work with youth. I'm wondering if you could speak more in that tune. With the flags and the sails. How's that feeling working with really famous artists with different types of market value and exploration value, and also working with youth?
It was, when you're working with, there's nobody sweeter than Amelia Kubikoff. She's she's the ultimate grandmother. When I was in Russia, she was just she had a bear hug around me, and people say, well, how did you like Russia? I was like, it was amazing. But people didn't expect me to say that. But I think Amelia had me so sheltered that I didn't experience anything besides really, the best time ever. So working with artists who are that seasoned is good because it's always an exchange. It's they're learning from you, you're learning from them, and you just have to be open, and especially when you're working with, they're Russian. I'd never been to Russia. I didn't know anything about Russian culture. So it's like, I just knew a little bit like what you see, but I had no idea. But Russian people are some of the most sweetest, honestly. Like I got on the train, like coming from the airport, like I'm in San Francisco, like I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to go to the hotel. And an entire family came around me and said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to, I said the name of my hotel. They said, well, he's going to take you there. Okay. And they flagged this guy. I don't even know if they knew him. And the guy literally walked me. He took me from the train. He barely spoke to me. He was just very kind. He brought me a coffee and he dropped me off at my hotel. And I never saw him again. But they just wanted to make sure. They knew that I was not from there. And they were that caring to just, so it's like we hear all these things about different culture, but at the core of it, it's like, it's just really, it's humanity. So it's like, I have a lot of faith and trust in humanity.
We have a question. Thank you. We have a question from Maddie. When working closely with artists, how do you balance your own creative vision with honoring the work essence and integrity of the artists you work with? What types of strategies or approaches do you take when navigating your collaborative relationships?
Yeah, it's always about the artist. It's always what they want. It's their work, So I'm just there to kind of like help them fulfill that and make sure, logistically everything makes, it makes sense. And and sometimes I think that there's a lot of nuances in this, and I think there's a lot of mystery when it comes to, I think people romanticize the art market and the art world a lot, so for me it's like that's why it was important for me to bring Tahir and Tariku to Miami, because they had never been to they had never participated in a fair, and just participating in a fair and seeing what that is and being at Art Basel, it's like that kind of like so there's some education that goes along with it. And I think because I do have the experience of working with so many older artists, I've been privy to see it from the beginning to the end. So it's like I knew what it all looks like. So I kind of give them a glimpse of that, and then it's up to them to choose which way to go. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it's always the artist's choice.
Thank you. And we have another question. Could you talk a bit more about your work with graffiti artists?
Graffiti artists. Graffiti art, I love graffiti. I love, Shanique Smith is a graffiti artist. And working with her was amazing. She was a woman who was tagging on the streets in Baltimore. And now, if you see her, her paintings go for over $100,000 and then some. So graffiti artists to me are artists. It's like, like as one who studies, a little bit of, well, of course, arts of Africa, and I'm looking at, Egypt, I'm looking at, Medu Neter, I'm looking at hieroglyphics. So it's like, yeah, I'm looking at mark making, and I love it. It's, especially like when I'm traveling around, it really kind of gives me, a sense of the community. So it's like, I love graffiti. I love graffiti. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Thank you. And we have another question. How are you responding and working with artists at this moment, specifically with a spiked interest in work by Black artists? What is your advice for artists in the market to protect themselves and their work and its value?
Like for me, it's like, I just try to be consistent. I've always done what I do, and I've always worked with who I work with. It's like, it's not like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I got to find Black artists. It's like, no, I've always been working with artists of all colors. I work with artists from every continent because I love art, so it's like, I try not to pigeonhole anyone by color, by, gender, by anything, so, I would say for artists, make sure you know where your work is. Don't let anything go out of your studio without somebody signing for it. There's a lot of, make sure you have a consignment agreement, and, your price is your price. The price is your price. And like, just make sure that, all of that is consistent, because that to me, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, it's important for young artists, graduating from your MFA to really sit down and understand what your value is, right? And then when opportunities come, really set those in and evaluate the juxtaposition of what you think your value is and what people think your value is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, I think what's so interesting, I was listening to a talk, I believe it was Derek Adams that was saying, it's like, look, you know, working with artists like Frank Bowling, like, and Howard Dina, and like, you know, Ed Clark, these artists, no one paid attention to them for 30 years. Even like, you know, that there's artists I work with now, like, I'm not going to say names. It's like, you know, I was just over in the studio on Saturday, but it's like, you know, and I'm like, a lot of the artists now, it's like, I feel like they're making work for the market, and that's not a good thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I want people to kind of like slow down just a little bit, just slow down, and like, because otherwise I think they're cranking out way too quick. But if you look at someone like Ed, I mean, Ed had a history of like 40, I mean, no one paid attention to these artists. I mean, but like, look at Frank Bowling. No one paid attention to Frank Bowling, even though he was amazing. And he had a piece that he worked on for 30 years. Okay, 30 years. You know, so now these artists who are selling now, they're not going to be able to revisit their work. It's not going to be in their studio because everything is just like getting eaten up. So it's like, just pace yourself, you know, write out your goals, and don't let the market push you, because the market's going to be there. You know, the market will be there, and always keep a piece or two for yourself.
Thank you. Another question from Ada. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences as a Black woman studying art history right now. It is so inspiring to hear from people like you finding success and joy in your work. In regards to your Iconomania show, were you influenced by the MoMA Modern African Art in relation to Picasso exhibition?
Like the opposite of, to be honest with you. I did another show that probably was more kind of like in dialogue with that exhibition, Primitivism. It was the title of that, and where it used modern art it used actually traditional African art as an accessory kind of to modern art, where I don't know. It's like the alpha and the omega. Like, to me, it's like when I'm looking at art, I'm not looking at like, this is higher, this is lower, this is European, this goes here, you know? So it's like, I do believe that the canon is backwards. That's my opinion. We won't go there on this chat. But so yeah, so it was, I knew, of course I knew of that show, but that show received a lot of criticism. All of it was not good because it was like, you know, it was an accessory. It's like, how can something be an accessory if it's the inspiration? You know, what's the alpha and what's the omega? It's like, how come not put, right?
Thank you so much. We're coming to our time now. Does anyone have any final questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I wrote it down, but I guess you don't. I don't. You can read it. This is Joan Thorne.
Hi, Joan. I must have skimmed through. Sorry about that. Could you share it, please?
Sure. Also, it says that in order to turn on my video, you have to do something.
Oh, interesting.
But I guess we can forget it because it's too technical. Anyway, my question is really simply, how does abstraction play a role today in painting and in the art world? Because when I was going to graduate school, there were some very prominent teachers teaching painting who told all the students that painting was dead and that abstraction was dead. And some of my friends started crying because they said, well, my teacher told me that painting is dead, and particularly abstraction. And I said, well, what do you give a flying F, excuse me, just keep on painting. But a lot of students took it seriously and stopped painting.
Joan, okay, if you guys don't know Joan Thorne, she's a pretty famous abstract artist. So, I would actually ask you that question because you didn't stop. You know, so it's like, you know, so how would, you know what I mean? Like, you really didn't stop. I know, you know what I mean? Like, and she's quite prolific and quite good and quite seasoned. And the work it only gets, I mean, it's consistent. I mean, I think your work is extremely consistent. So it's like, I think, you know, can I answer that question with you? I mean, I would say, like, just keep going. Like, who cares? Like, you see this picture behind me? This is noise. You know what I'm saying? Like, so just block out that noise.
Well, I didn't stop because I couldn't stop.
Right.
I didn't stop because, you know, young minds are very you can influence a young mind pretty quickly. But in my mind, you could put me in jail and take away, everything, and I'd still somehow make a painting, and it would be abstract or an abstraction. And so I'm of a mind, other people are more vulnerable, but I wasn't that vulnerable, so I never stopped. And but other of my student friends did stop.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, you can't stop, and I'm glad you didn't stop, because the work is amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank y'all so much. This has been great. Thank you for kicking off the series with me, Alaina.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And everyone have a good night.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bravo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mhm.